So this has been a great day, as Jonathan just said. I've really been impressed with the talks I've heard, with the general level of excitement I've seen, and I don't think this could have come off better, and it's a testament to the organization that went into it, but we'll celebrate that some more later, I think. So let me remind you what I think the purpose of this was. It was not only to feature and celebrate the work done here, research work done by postdocs and grad students, but to also begin to explore ways to make that experience even better for future postdocs and students at the laboratory. We all know that the contributions of postdocs to research is often just as important and fundamental as that of other researchers involved in the various collaborative efforts we sponsor and support here. So I think it's been important to find a way to celebrate that, and I think today is an example of how this can be done. I suppose there's always room for improvement, but I certainly would like to see this kind of activity incorporated into the culture, the scientific culture of the laboratory, and be carried on in the future. And in that spirit, I want to thank the Association of Students and Postdocs for actually having this idea in the first place, for taking the initiative, which included discussions with me and Dune about how to find the resources to make this work, for organizing the symposium and everything. So it's really a pleasure to be part of this closing session for me. So I want to talk a little bit about, the value of postdocs from my perspective, and where the postdoc program will go here in the future. And so let me some of these thoughts are a little bit random, but maybe it'll all make sense at the end. I'm thinking back to my own postdoc experience, which I'll talk about a little more later. I think generally the value of postdocs to research groups is simply by joining those groups and by implication, or maybe even explicitly, questioning everything that's going on in that group. They also bring some new knowledge from some other research enterprise with them. So I think that's actually a mind-expanding experience for a research group, because it lets, or maybe even makes, everybody in the group re-examine the working assumptions that go into that research, maybe even the biases that underlie those working assumptions. And it also allows the postdoc to bring something in to inform and to influence the future direction of the research, just because they came from somewhere else. Brookhaven's really committed to the idea that postdocs are as important to the research that they join as it is to the postdoc's own career development. Everybody knows, and I even saw it on some slides today in one of the parallel sessions, Newton's famous statement, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Now, this is a modest-sounding statement, and I'm pretty sure that Newton wasn't actually Kepler's postdoc, but the message is clear in that to me, and that is that the new guy who joined the effort is the one who made the big breakthrough discoveries. So it's something for, I think, young researchers to ponder what their potential role can be. Over a long period of time now, going back of order 20 years, I think we've actually made a specific effort at Brookhaven to help research groups expand the ranks of their postdocs. We actually subsidize the support of postdocs through the laboratory and to make them more affordable to research groups. And that is in part the reason why over the last 20 years, the number of postdocs here at the lab has grown from something like 60 to something like 3 times that number. Now, over that period of 20 years, the lab's total population has tended to fluctuate between a little over 3,000 to a little over 2,500, up and down depending on what big projects were going on. So it's fairly stable at the 15% level or so. And so that the growth, the threefold growth in the postdoc population has been real growth in those terms. And I think that's an important aspect of the lab's scientific vibrancy and why I would like to continue to support the growth of the postdoc population here in the future. Let me just take a minute out to go back and say something about my time as a postdoc. I'm not sure how illustrative this is, but anyway, it's what I've got. I was a graduate student at Princeton in particle physics in the middle of the last century. I'm surprised to be able to write down and be honest about. It's a long time ago. It's a time when the study of K-mesons, particular elementary particle, was a hot topic. It was even a topic which back in those days produced one of Brookhaven's 7 Nobel Prizes, which was awarded, by the way, to people from the high energy group at Princeton, where I was at the time. I didn't work on that research. I worked on related topics. But the point of this little episode is not my graduate student career. It's what happened after that. I was a postdoc after that and hired by a group at the University of Chicago that had recently started working in K-meson physics. We did a bunch of very interesting K-meson experiments there, both at Argonne National Laboratory and at Fermilab, which was just starting in those days. This is the early 70s. My mentor at the time, so the head of the group at Chicago, was pretty hard on his own grad students. I thought unreasonably hard, especially since all of them seemed to know at least as much physics as I did as a postdoc. But I got treated by this guy as a postdoc somewhat differently, that is with some modicum of respect. I think this was because I was, quote, out of town, unquote, in the scientific sense. That is, I came from some other research group with different experiences, and I think the presumption was I had something to add that wasn't there already. I think the other thing that sold him on me was that I had managed to complete my PhD thesis without much interference or help from my thesis advisor. I knew a lot of stuff when I got there. I knew how to make some of the detectors that we needed to make to do the early experiments at Argonne. I knew how to do computer simulations of the decay and detection of K-mesons. I knew some physics of K-mesons. I would say, though, I really didn't know, as a graduate student, recently graduated student, how to do physics. That is, the whole picture, how to fit it into a context, how to think about the resources required, how to think about the interaction between us as a university research group and the laboratory where we did our work. I didn't know any of that stuff. I learned all that as a postdoc, not as a grad student, which was a much more hermetic existence where we had our own accelerator at Princeton at the time, and it was more like a nursery environment. The real world was when I was a postdoc, I think. Looking back on it, I think everyone in the Chicago group actually benefited from the fact that I was a postdoc there, because I did bring other stuff in, and we started some new stuff, and it was a lot of fun. But I actually got much more out of it because I actually got to be a scientist as a result of that experience. So that's what the value of being a postdoc was to me. At national laboratories in general, and of course, naturally, I would say particularly at Brookhaven, you find great places to start careers in scientific research. Brookhaven is one of a few of the labs that put a big emphasis on multi-program research and on interdisciplinary research. This exposes scientists to a diverse set of peers, of mentors, of methods, and of facilities. I'll talk a little bit more about facilities in a minute. Also, since the interfaces between scientific fields are often the place where new research directions are spawned, being in the presence of interdisciplinary research also exposes new scientists to new opportunities. BNL has also put a big emphasis on the translation of basic research through innovation into new technologies, what we call the path from discovery to deployment. This has actually always been a part of the lab's portfolio going back to the very beginning. but we put a lot more attention on and investment in that in the last decade or so. It's meant to enhance Brookhaven's impact in the world with new technologies, but it also broadens the opportunity space for new scientists, some of whom will find careers in industrial as well as academic or laboratory environments. Let me return now to the comment I made earlier about a diverse set of facilities. This is a real strength of Brookhaven and other national labs, and a major attractor, I would think, for postdocs. It's part of our mission, as you know, to provide cutting-edge research facilities that are beyond the reach of individual universities to build and to operate. RIC, the two light sources, the Nano Center, the Solar Energy Research Center, which is a building right now, these are examples of that. Being a postdoc at a facility that attracts scientists from around the world is good for one's career, and it's these kinds of tools that's the major attractor for those. We have the additional benefit that we're nearby a major research university, which actually is involved in the operation of Brookhaven, as you know. And there are centers of excellence there, sponsored by the state, which are in similar ways are cutting-edge research tools. So there's a synergy there also that shouldn't go unnoticed, and I think provides further opportunities for postdocs, either for their next career or next step in their career, or maybe just during their postdoc position here. Trying to look at Brookhaven from the perspective of a young researcher, I think of it as an especially good place to make the transition from grad student to scientist that I was describing earlier, which I did at the Enrico Fermi Institute at the University of Chicago, which was in some gray zone between a laboratory, a national laboratory, and a university environment. It was separate from the physics department. It had its own cyclotron in the basement and a lot of support things, instrumentation builders and detector builders and good computing and so on. So it was a little bit like a national lab. So I hope these remarks aren't too far off base. But let me think now just about Brookhaven, which I know well enough after 35 years, and I think it certainly has what I had to make my transition to scientist from postdoc and much more. So it's a place for new postdocs to bring that questioning attitude I talked to and a new skill set to challenging research questions, but there are lots of places like that, universities and labs included. What's more, I think, is it's a place to hone one's skills and develop one's scientific tastes among a worldwide community of brilliant researchers, all using state-of-the-art tools and techniques. They come here to have access to those, like you did, as new postdocs, and they create a community that's an invaluable source of knowledge, new ideas, network connections for the future of your careers, and so on. I'm talking not only about peers and mentors, I'm talking also about technicians and engineers, computer scientists. I mean, this is a very rich and complete community from the point of view of building a scientific career. From a Brookhaven perspective, now I'm looking at the other side of this value proposition. This is an opportunity for us to fulfill part of our mission that speaks to the future of the scientific workforce. Broadly, but not incidentally, the quality and vitality of Brookhaven's future workforce. And so making an impact here might have local career implications for you, but certainly will have worldwide ones. And we heard today, if you were here for that career panel, I thought that was one of the highlights of the day, actually. The comments of former Brookhaven postdocs about the value of having come from Brookhaven, and some of them didn't move all that far away and are still connected with Brookhaven. So there are all of those benefits as well. The other thing that we need to do, and which I think the best and the brightest of the next generation of scientists help us do, is to make the case for the science and technology that we do to our sponsors, namely the taxpayers, and this goes maybe back to the question we heard earlier today to Steve. postdocs at Brookhaven presumably will have their own perspectives on the value of their experience here, independent of what I just told you. And I think each of them will hopefully make unique use of what Brookhaven has to offer as a stepping stone toward their career trajectory, whether it's here or not here. And I just urge that you try to keep fully in mind the opportunities that actually come to you as a consequence of being here. You should be talking science with your peers from other disciplines. You should be making use of the network connections from this large international community of researchers that collects around facilities like Brookhaven and so forth. You can even maybe find your niche in the pathway from discovery to deployment by seeing the whole chain being played out here in various fields. Now, I'm telling you this as a person who actually isn't very good at doing that historically. I actually, if I look back on it, I think I bumbled my way through my career to a large degree and never learned early on how to, exploit my strengths and improve my weaknesses to make a career path that had a definite set of goals. For a bumbler like me, actually, the lab was a good place, too. I came here to work on a facility called Isabel that Steve also mentioned. This goes back to the 70s when we were going to build a high-energy proton collider here for high-energy physics, and it got killed a couple years after I got here. It wasn't a mistake to come, as it turns out, because what emerged from the ashes of that debacle was RIC, which has been, as you just heard from Steve, a world-class success over many years. But I worked on that. I worked on the design of facilities which we're still living in as experimentalists at RIC. They're the same buildings that we were designing for Isabel in those days. I got to do some physics when I wasn't doing my day job working on the Isabel project. I worked on neutrino experiments. I helped to build one of the big detectors for the Tevatron at Fermilab that we collaborated in from here. And I got to I finally got a permanent job here, which was a blessing and something that's, I think, sort of the elephant in the room about today's discussions with the career panel. And I found many opportunities to develop further. I wonder about some of them, like management and administration, but they come with the territory, and somebody has to do them, and if you can turn your career objectives toward those, you can actually make a big difference in science if you do those. But certainly not to downplay the importance of building a first-class research career out of the assets that are available to you here. I worked with a lot of postdocs in the course of doing those experiments as part of my job here, growing up as a Brookhaven person. These were postdocs both from Brookhaven, part of our postdoc cohort, but also those from collaborating universities and other labs who we worked with on big projects on designing and building and running and analyzing data from big experiments. My most recent experience with that was with the Phoenix experiment at RIC. I worked on that for about a decade. And those big experiments are like families, and big, sprawling families with all the good and bad that those of you who come from big families know of. The good of that is that you get to actually watch at close range the career development of dozens of bright young people, grad students and postdocs, and I've always enjoyed that, and it's kept me fully aware of the value of postdocs to research, both small laboratory experiments with single principal investigators and these big collaborations with hundreds to thousands of people in them. Let me just try to wrap up. I think in the last 6 or 7 years, we've added something like 70 research associates and Goldhaber fellows to Brookhaven's scientific workforce. So we're continuing to enhance and focus on the postdoc population here and its value to the laboratory. The research here attracts good postdocs, and the good postdocs in turn make this a more vibrant place. And today was a great chance to focus on that latter bit, the contribution of postdocs to the laboratory. As you continue your careers beyond being postdocs, I think you probably will be able to build on what you've learned from your peers and your mentors here and back in graduate school, of course. And the things you have to do, I think, are to really seize on the opportunities that are available to not only to further your own research, but also to educate and encourage other future scientists, the people who are coming up behind you. You need always to be a champion for the work that you do. We heard some questions just this afternoon from the audience that indicate that people feel the need or feel not up to the need to advocate for what the kind of work that they do with the rest of the population. So and I find here at the lab it's so important to continually be advocating for what we do, its value, as Steve talked about in the answer to some questions, and its fundamental benefit to society. So that means you talk to elected officials, you talk to funding agencies, you talk to the media, you talk to the guy in the line at the grocery store or in the next barber chair, whoever. I had an experience recently. Two guys came to move some furniture at my house, and one of them actually recognized me from a picture in the newspaper. We then had a 20-minute conversation about Brookhaven and all that cool stuff that they're doing at RIC in the beginning of the universe, and just ordinary working stiffs here on Long Island who pay attention. They read stuff in Newsday and maybe even the New York Times, I don't know, or probably not Physical Review letters. But they're interested and they're excited about this, and you have to be ready any time that comes up to be able to try to enhance that. Your work as scientists actually demands that, as well as your commitment to, putting in the hours to do the research, because that takes this out into the community and extends your work and probably extends the possibility of continuing to do this work. So those are my thoughts for today. I hope they are of some value or at least mild entertainment. I'll take questions if you want. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I basically wondered, at what time in your career did you sort of decided to rather go into sort of the management direction than the sort of science direction? If I understood properly, on a certain point you made this choice, or did I misunderstood this?
That's a very, very good question, and the answer is no. There was no real turning point. I just got involved in scientific work that was bigger and needed more organization, more administration. I think the real, if I look all the way back to the experiments I've done, especially the ones since I came to Brookhaven, they've increased in scale in terms of the size of the groups that were doing them, the size of the apparatus we were building, the complexities, and so on. And I found I had an ability to organize some of that, and each new experiment provided new challenges, and so I just wound up at a point where, here, I can think of what I'm doing as science, but I use different tools to do it with. I use you to do the science. So I'm not, building light pipes and tuning photomultipliers anymore. I'm spending most of my time making sure we have people like you here to do the science. You can, hindsight is great. You can look back on it and see it as a continuum. I actually can't detect the time when I decided, no, I want to be an administrator. It's a good question, though.